Shmai Wales, croeso, good morning Wales, uzo dwi'n byw yn Abertawe nawr, ond dwi'n dod o Nigeria yn wreiddiol. Dwi'n hoffi siarad Cymraeg, ond dwi'n dysgu Cymraeg. Braf crwd a chi, lovely to meet you all, welcome. Welcome, warm welcome to the launch of the first joint international conference that we're hosting for Wales. It involves a number of organizations across the Wales Race Forum room. We are doing this collectively, jointly, and together, and in unity, involving all the community cohesion officers from right across Wales, involving our fantastic National Museums of Wales, involving all the people who've signed the Wales TUC, the Unison Cymru, all the people who've signed the pledge, the Zero Racism Pledge. In 1966, the United Nations named 21st of March as the International Day for the Elimination of Race Discrimination to mark the anniversary of the Sharpeville massacre in South Africa. And since 1948, a policy of racial segregation known as apartheid had caused huge inequalities between the white and black South Africans. So on the 21st of March, 1960, black South Africans held a nationwide demonstration, and a large crowd gathered outside a police station in the township of Sharpeville. The 6,000 peaceful protesters were confronted by 300 heavily armed police. And without warning, the police opened fire and continued to shoot as the protesters tried to run away. 69 people were killed, 300 people were injured, most of them were women and children. International protests followed, including condemnation by the United Nations. And to mark the 2006 anniversary, different faith groups, schools, organizations in Wales joined together to pledge their support to work towards an equal and diverse world. This is why we mark the UN Day for Eliminating Race Discrimination on the 21st of March every year. Now, looking at our world and what's happened recently in 2020, we were hit by the biggest pandemic the world has ever seen that is still ongoing. And we were shown the worst of the worst pandemic we have ever experienced as a people, and are still going through it. And through that, we saw a marked leadership by the First Minister of Wales, unprecedented response to all the peoples of Wales, whether you're black, white, mixed, whatever color. Mark Drakeford showed leadership to protect every single member of this nation. And he came around to listen to some of what we had to say. He listened and he led by example. I say the legacy of our First Minister for Black people, for Black Wales, is that we now have him saying we want to establish an anti-racist society, not just in Welsh government, but across the whole of Wales. And he's taking measures to ensure we are all protected, black, white, non-white. It is unprecedented in the history of Wales. And I want us to remember that. When we think of Mark Drakeford, we celebrate his leadership and his ability to rise to the occasion. I don't know about you, but I'm glad to be living in Wales and to make sure that we have the lowest figures on deaths in the pandemic. First Minister, I'm doing your speech, but I'm just too excited. I have to say that about you. And many of my relatives in London want to move to Wales because of how tough you've been prepared to show leadership and stand up for your people to save our lives. And we thank you so much at the beginning, even before you speak. Without much ado, it gives me great pleasure to warmly welcome our fantastic, indefatigable First Minister, Mark Drakeford, Professor Mark Drakeford, MS. Diolch yn fawr.
So, diolch yn fawr I ti am y cyflwyniad mor caredig yna, ac am y cyfle I bod gyda chi gyd heddi. Thank you all very much for the chance to be with you at the Zero Tolerance to Racism policy in Wales launch today. The Welsh Government stands absolutely foursquare behind Race Council Cymru's campaign and all those people who are gathered under that banner to deliver a zero racist Wales, where we come together in unity and with purpose to eliminate all forms of racism here in Wales. There is no place for racism in any aspect of Welsh life. And as Uzo said in her introduction, in order to do that, we have to be an actively anti-racist government in an actively anti-racist Wales. And the programme that you have today is such a celebration of that. It is such a fantastic drawing together of people over that whole spectrum, whether it's our universities, whether it's frontline campaigners, or trade union colleagues, those people who are involved in the practical delivery of services every day, services that need to reflect today's Wales and to be part of our determination to create a Wales that in every core and every pore is anti-racist to its heart. So lots of what I wanted to do in this very brief opening is just to thank all those people, the people you will be hearing from today, and particularly to thank all those people who have been part of the development of our Race Equality Action Plan. You know, I gave a commitment as the First Minister of the Welsh Government that we would publish that plan before the end of this Senedd term. And although we have literally days to go now before the Senedd will no longer be sitting until after the election, we will deliver that promise. Next week, that Race Equality Action Plan, led by our Deputy Minister and Chief Whip, Jane Hutt, that will be published by the Welsh Government. Our first standalone strategy or plan on race for many years. And I'm just so grateful for everybody who has helped us make sure that the plan is rooted in the lived experience of Black people here in Wales. That it is not a plan that is remote from people's lives, but it's a plan that is rooted in those lives. And everybody who has played a part in shaping the plan has really, really made a difference to it. The plan has its genesis in the experience of the last 12 months, because very early on, we were alerted by Judge Ray Singh, by Professor Keshav Singhal and others to the disproportionate impact that coronavirus was having on Black and minority ethnic communities here in Wales. The group that was brought together, chaired by Judge Singh, has been central to our ability to make sure that we respond as a government and as a society to that disproportionate impact. And that disproportionate impact is rooted in those wider and long-standing forms of discrimination that we know are there in Welsh society. And that is what forms the background to the plan that we will be launching next week. A plan that has been delivered through engagement with communities, the need for us to dismantle structures and systems that have undermined and disadvantaged too many people here in Wales, and a plan that, as Professor Emmanuel Ogbonna reminded the Cabinet when he met with us on Monday of this week, a plan that has to be delivered, a plan where accountability for the different things to which we make a commitment, that we can give people confidence that the recommendations in the plan, the actions that it sets out, that they will make their way from the page and into the lives of Black people here in Wales. So that's the commitment that we make as a Welsh Government, alongside everything else that you will hear today as part of this very important event. Thanks once again to everybody who is taking part, for the contributions that you all make, for the way in which your experiences have come together to make that difference inside the Welsh Government, and will go on making that difference as our Race Equality Action Plan becomes what it says, a plan for action, a plan in that anti-racist way to promote the more inclusive society that we have and want to create in Wales, that society that gives every individual the right to feel safe, valued and included. Diolch o galon I chi gyd am popeth I wneud, a diolch Uzo am heddi.
Diolch yn fawr, First Minister. Absolutely phenomenal speech. Thank you so much for standing and promoting an anti-racist Wales. We are so glad to hear those words from you and to celebrate your leadership and hopefully see you soon. We hope very much that you'll continue the good work that you have started. The next speaker is a person who needs no introduction. Shavana Taj is the Secretary General for the Wales TUC. She is an outstanding champion for women and men and equal rights for employees across the Wales. She's holding employers to account. Every single time you hear Shavana, you learn something new. She is a champion for Wales and a person who has spoken for many who have no voice at this time. Warmly welcome you, Sister Shavana Taj.
Wow, that was, I'm not quite sure what I meant to say after all of that. First and foremost, I just want to thank my sister Uzo and Patience and the team really that have made today even possible. A lot has happened over the past year and a half, and I guess where I should really start from is saying, yes, I am the General Secretary of the Wales TUC. I'm a long-standing trade unionist. I'm a socialist. I'm an activist. I'm also a mother to 2 young Black children. So when we talk about an approach to zero tolerance, what does that mean? And that is the big conversation, and that is the difficult conversation that we need to have. We need to have those conversations in our own lives. We need to have those conversations in workplaces. We need to have those conversations on the streets. We need to have conversations on screens like this. Now, during this period, we've seen lots of different individuals' voices, people coming together, uniting over one cause or the other, whether it's climate change, whether it's standing up against racism, whether it's, fighting to reclaim the streets. Well, zero tolerance for me is about Black people being able to reclaim our lives. That's what this is about. Because quite frankly, we have had such an ongoing, it's like ongoing every single day. You get re-traumatized. You go through yet another conversation and you think, why am I having this conversation with somebody of this level who, quite frankly, they should know better. Why am I even having to have this conversation? So that's why I think what's really important about saying very boldly, and this is a very bold statement, right? We're being very bodacious. We're saying we do not tolerate racism. We do not tolerate racism, period. There's no getting away with it. There's no get out clause. There's no it's okay because you're my friend. There's none of that. We're saying zero tolerance. Enough already. We are tired. We've got our lives to be getting on with. We can't even get on with our lives without seeing something on a screen, experiencing it, hearing a friend going through something. It's constant. It's absolutely constant. And that's why, for me, what people must understand about this campaign is, yes, we are asking you to sign up to say that you and your organization do not accept racism within your workplace, within your organization. But equally, we are asking you to be better human beings. We are asking you to be better people. The same people, the same face that you present when you attend an interview and you are fighting to get that job, I want that face. I want the real face. I want to know that you have my back. I want to know that you will not be a bystander. I want to know that when I am scared, that you will be there to pick me up. You will stand with me. I should not have to ask for it. We are tired of asking. We have gotten now to a stage where we're even past demanding, because that is the level of trauma that continues in our lives on a daily basis. And it's not good enough. It's really, really not good enough. This period, I mean, the discussions and the actions that we have seen from so many different authorities, and we've just had the First Minister on the screen. Now you compare his leadership to many other people who lead a range of different organizations, and you just wonder, how can it be that there is such an extreme level of variety when it comes to leadership, when it comes to having a zero approach to racism? How can that be? How can that be acceptable? We cannot continue in this way, where it's again and again and again. We just really, honestly, we can't go there. But as the American activist Angela Davis once said, we must lift in order to rise. And I think that's what this is about for me. This is about saying, you know what, enough is enough, but we will protect ourselves. We will look after each other. And if you want to stand over there with your nonsense, you carry on in your nonsense, because there is more of us and there is less of you. There is more of us and there is less of you. That is what, that is ultimately what we are talking about here. We are not looking for crumbs. The British slave trade may have ended in 1807 and slavery in 1833. However, racism definitely wouldn't end in abolition, because it was seen as, quite frankly, as too valuable. And as many academics and, activists have said, that racism has now become the handmaiden to the empire. This whole mythology around race and white superiority, we all experience this on a daily basis. This has now become the norm in terms of how our institutions and our structures continue to operate. It's so deeply embedded and entrenched that on a regular basis, you'll have every 3 years a new action plan, and everything gets tinkered around the edges. And there's a couple of targets that are set, and people get really happy because they've hit some of the targets. But does it stop people, facing racism in the workplace? Does it stop the fact that, even when it came to COVID, the fact of the matter is, the TUC, we've done plenty of research on this. We know that 1 in 3 BME workers have had to self-isolate during COVID, during this pandemic, a much higher rate than when compared to white workers. And why is that? Because we know the long-standing structural systemic racism and discrimination has meant that many workers, particularly, those who are extremely low paid, often on the front line, key workers, people who have kept our utilities going, people who have kept us fed all of this time, people who have kept our hospitals, our care homes, etc. running, they have been overexposed to COVID. They have not been protected in the way that they should have been. They were not provided with the appropriate level of PPE. And why was that? Because for such a long time, they have voiced what is going on with them in the workplace before COVID even happened. And nobody listened. And there wasn't, the fact that we have lost so many experienced, committed, Black, brown, ethnic minority, trade unionists even, who were there trying to protect their colleagues breaks my heart, because I know that this goes back down to everything that I've just referenced. It goes back to the fact that we do tolerate racism in the workplace. We do tolerate discrimination and inequality within our structures and our systems, within our schools. And it is our duty now to come together as a collective to hold the powerful to account. We can't do that individually, because when they come for you, they come for you. Because when you organize and you demand change and you say enough is enough, it shakes the establishment. So we have to be there for one another and to support each other through this. But equally, I tell you now, including within the trade union movement, we are going through a big exercise. We have set up an anti-racism task force. We're looking inside and we're going to look outside too. And I honestly, I ask every single person on this call, please do not attend events because you think that having your face on the screen or being standing next to the appropriate person will get you far. We are not your tokens. We are not your hashtags. We are not your fashion labels. We want better, not only for ourselves, but for the generations who are crying out there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Wow. Shavana, we could listen to you the whole day. Thank you so much for that. Right away, over to Heather Powell, who is a Community Cohesion Coordinator from Newport, to represent all the regional Community Cohesion Coordinators. Over to you, Heather.
Thanks, Uzo, and thanks, Shavana, because that's really difficult to follow on from that. So I'm going to talk about the All Wales Community Cohesion Programme, which is a Welsh Government funded programme which has been running for a number of years now. I cover Newport and Monmouthshire, but as Uzo says, I'm representing colleagues from across Wales today. I'm going to apologise from the outset because I probably won't do justice to the breadth and extent of work that's going on across Wales in this space, given the amount of time that I've got. But what I'll do is hopefully touch on some of the key work that we've been undertaking as a collective, particularly in the race equality space over the last 18 months or so. A little bit of background about the programme. We've been very fortunate to have been funded since 2012 by Welsh Government, and the aim of the programme is to really deliver a consistent approach to cohesion across Wales. And then in 2019, our teams were expanded and we were able to recruit additional resources in the form of community cohesion officers to respond to some of the increase in tensions and fallout we saw for communities around the EU referendum and Brexit. So at the moment, we've got 8 community cohesion coordinators supported by cohesion officers based across Wales, and we cover different regions. Some of our priorities include monitoring and responding to community tensions, hate crime, and engaging with minority and marginalised communities. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the challenges that we've seen this year, and they will come as no surprise to people on the call today. Obviously, we've had and are still in the midst of a global pandemic, and we're acutely aware of the disproportionate impact that COVID-19 has had on our Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities, which Shavana and the First Minister have already touched on, and the sort of laying bare of the structural and social inequalities that we know have existed for generations. Brexit, I've already mentioned, and it's kind of taken perhaps a back seat in the midst of the COVID-19 response, but it's still something that is impacting on our communities on a daily basis, particularly our EU and EAA migrant communities. We've seen a rise in conspiracy theories and associated right-wing narrative, particularly in some of the protests we saw during lockdown, anti-lockdown protests, anti-government, anti-vaccination protests and narrative, and those sorts of things are causing real fear and division across our communities at the moment. We've seen a rise in anti-migrant rhetoric, which is closely linked to some of the impacts of Brexit. We've seen an unprecedented number of small boat crossings, asylum seekers arriving in the UK over the last year, and that's hit the media in really unsavoury ways. We've faced our own issues in Wales with the site in Penally, which has taken up a lot of time and effort for colleagues based in West Wales. We've seen rises in hate crime, which isn't something that surprises anybody. Hate crime rises year on year, partly because people are more aware of how to report it, but partly because it is something that is happening more frequently across communities. And we've seen that particularly impact our Southeast Asian communities over the last 12 to 18 months. Black Lives Matter movement, I've put that in here as a challenge. I think more than anything, it's been a huge opportunity, and certainly for us as cohesion coordinators and working within the public sector, it's really challenged us to question what are we really doing, what changes are we really making, what difference can we see from where we were 10, 20 years ago. So in many ways, that's been a huge positive, but it did present us with challenges. We had a series of protests during lockdown. We saw the galvanization or the momentum of the counter narrative that was pushed back against the Black Lives Matter movement, which is incredibly damaging in lots of cases. And all of these things have contributed to an overall rise in community tensions. I'm just going to pick up on a few of the sort of examples of work that we've been doing as cohesion coordinators across Wales. So in terms of COVID-19 response, we were really keen from an early stage to make sure that we were supporting communities to get the right information in the right format that was accessible to them. So a couple of examples here. In Gwent, we established a socially vulnerable group cell, which really focused on making sure that our BAME communities had access to information in community languages, that we promoted test and trace through our trusted networks, that we went on to traveller sites and gave out information to people, that every asylum seeker had a letter in their home language telling them how to access test and trace. And similarly in Swansea, they're doing some really good work around vaccinations, starting to establish a Tell Me More campaign, looking at providing BAME communities with accurate information from credible sources and countering some of the myths that are circulating at the moment around vaccination. It's also really important that we encourage and support communities to recover from COVID, so it's not just about that initial response. And there are a few grant schemes that cohesion coordinators are involved with at the moment. Mid and West Wales Community Grant Scheme, funding projects promoting diversity and inclusion, looking at talking groups, community events, digital stories, involving other agencies in those events. And in East Gwent, we're just about to distribute £100,000 worth of funding to those communities who are most impacted by COVID-19 to support them to recover. And participatory budgeting means that communities play a really active role in voting for those projects that they think will have the greatest impact for their communities.
One more minute. That's
one. Oh my gosh, Uzo,
yes,
is
that 10:30? 10:30, yes.
Good grief, I'm going to have to whiz through now. Yeah. EU settlement scheme, I'll mention really quickly. A key focus of our work over the last 18 months has been ensuring that our EU migrant communities are able to access information about the EU settlement scheme, apply to the scheme, and make sure that they are protected to continue to live and work in the UK. A little bit about the Vulnerable Persons Resettlement Programme. All of the cohesion coordinators either manage or support this programme. All 22 local authorities are part of it. And to date, we've resettled 1,411 refugees across Wales, and we will continue to do so under the government's new scheme over the coming years. And then just to touch on some of our race equality work, and there's an example there from Cardiff, who have established a race equality task force. I think what we've seen is a real step change in leadership across local government as well. And Shavana made a really good point, you know, don't go to a meeting if you think it's a tick box, don't go to a meeting if you're not getting change. And what we're seeing is people having real access, authentic access to leaders who can make those changes in fairly quick time. And that's something that's been really encouraging across the board in Wales. And as cohesion coordinators, we are all supporting the zero tolerance to racism in Wales campaign, even though I can't say it very well. I'm going to finish there because I know Uzo will cut me off if I don't. If you don't know who your cohesion coordinator is, you've not been in touch with them before, that's all of our details there. So thanks very much for the opportunity to speak today, Uzo.
Oh, thank you so much, Heather, for that whistle tour. We can have that shown on the website of all the groups who have are partnering to put this forward. Like I said, this is a joint partnership event. Right away, because of time, I move straight away to the woman of the hour, Queen Nish, the face and the voice behind the Zero Racism campaign. If you haven't heard her at protests, well, you're about to hear her now. Nellie Adams, Queen Nish, over to you.
Thank you so much, Uzo. First and foremost, thank you to everyone that has attended. Look, we've had a lot of talking. I would like to break this up a little bit. I'm going to give you a spoken word piece. I wrote this last year, and it has never, ever become as relevant as it is today. So today's a day. My life will change in every way. I've come out and I'm going to have my say. I've stood up in front of thousands of people, telling them about all the racial labels. Since 2020, I've been fighting for our basic rights. Instead, you want to say we're trying to start a fight. No one seems to want to listen. Abused a man who just exposed the system. Lost focus is called police brutality, fuel racism and cruelty. If white privilege doesn't exist, all the statues need to be abolished. Black skin, white skin, what difference does it make? Oh yeah, I forgot. The system is still fake. Why don't all Black lives matter? Oh yeah, because the system would be shattered. Systematic racism, let's end it. Instead you punish us, we get suspended. For what? Standing up for ourselves, being punished by slave masters like we live in hell. You're no longer keeping us under your spell. We're all tired now, time the old system fell. All we want is to be treated fairly and be given equal opportunities, given work so we can feed our families. Does this really sound like we're the criminals? Does our color make you feel inferior? That somehow you need to prove you're superior? It's about time everything changes before this generation grows in its rages. I know the people have heard my voice, realizing they can make a choice to sit back and watch it all quietly or speak up and end police brutality. No justice, no peace. We won't live in poverty. Realize that we're all human. We bleed the same color. We're fuming. How can Black people ever breathe when you don't give them opportunities? All these changes cause anxiety. So together we'll stand to fight society. All we ask for is a little respect. You use media to politically infect. If all lives truly mattered, you wouldn't just see Black men battered. I can't hold my silence any longer, so I'll shout to make us stronger. We need unity to end the division. Update your policies, they need revision. We need to understand this land is not just for the white man. You might not think that this still exists, so I'll try educate you, I insist. Insist you go and ask your questions and see how far you're led by your deception. Open your eyes and let's stay woke. Today for all of you, Queen Nish spoke. I'm a Muslim woman, African and Asian. I'm making most of the occasion. Stand up, address the situation. Try teach you by starting education, by preventing fake allegations. I stand with you like we're one nation. Let's stand and start a new chapter. End racism like it's a rapture. My speech, I hope your hearts are captured, because this time my heart's been fractured. Representing all that have suffered. I don't fear no more, my voice won't be buffered. We're getting there, the movement is strong. Soon they will wake and know they were wrong. Racism is real, it needs to be acknowledged. System of oppression need to get more knowledge. Go and learn the history they don't teach you and realize they lie when they preach to you. For us, it's all gone way too far. So now we're aiming up for the stars. We demand respect and rights. Don't say we're trying to start a fight. This is my reaction to your actions. Please don't blame me, no retractions. Black lives will finally matter. You want to close a case? Then deal with the latter. Black Lives Matter. Right, guys, thank you so much. I know you're all muted, but I'm feeling it. I'm feeling it. It's good. Right, the reason I wanted to give you that, first and foremost, I'm Nellie, Queen Niche, and I lead on Zero Racism Wales. Zero racism, I don't really need to tell you what it is, but there's a couple of things that I desperately need to reiterate here. First and foremost, racism is real. It's very real. I live it every single day of my life. No matter how hard I try, no matter how many protests I go to, I scream, my voice trembles buildings, yet people remain deaf to what I am saying. Now a bill is going to be passed that somebody like me that has a voice built to take on all the people that no longer have a voice. Now I can be punished for using my voice. I have no freedom. I have no rights. I work for the NHS. I work in human resources. I know policies. I know how this all goes. And one thing I will tell you unconditionally, racism is real. Zero Racism Wales. This is not about, oh, let's just say we don't like racist or we don't accept. No, zero tolerance. This means if you see somebody making a joke, using terminology such as paki, even I've been called a biryani. What the, do you know how tasty biryani is? If I was a biryani, I'd be damn tasty. Let me tell you that much, right? But the fact that this is what people think that they can say and do, unacceptable. I've had my hijab pulled from my head. My family have been tortured. Racism is very real. I now need everybody to stand with me, not for me, not to celebrate me, not to clap on my behalf. I'm not here for the fame. I'm here to make change, the equality. Zero Racism Wales is about no tolerance. It's about all of you becoming ambassadors, standing with us, supporting it, getting your organizations to sign up, getting your individuals to sign up. What we're doing here, this is the beginning of something magnificent for the whole of Wales, something that nobody else has ever done. Okay? We need the pledges. We need the numbers. You know how the system works. Without the numbers, we cannot prove the cause is real. We need everybody on board. Please take your pledges. This is our way forward of holding people accountable, not just for things like, oh, they were racist, or oh, it hurt feelings. Understand this much. I'm trying to educate. Racism is an emotion that people suffer. An emotion that is then wiped clear by those that don't understand it. Try walk into your workplace and tell your employer, feel really sad today. I walked past a guy who just gave me a dirty look and called me, excuse the word, but called me a paki. I get told, you need to leave your problems on the doorstep before you come to work, you know? No, you can't. No, you can't. Like everybody has said, and I don't want to take up any more time because I know we're running, but we all need to stand together. We need to acknowledge racism is very real. Systemic racism has never been so real, and it is evident. The amount I could talk and tell you all, I just don't have time, otherwise I truly would. But I lead, and I have put my face to Zero Racism Wales because this is how we change the future. In life, we can't fight every battle, but what we can do is stand together, unite, because we need equality to end the division. Thank you so very much. I hope you all sign up to Zero Racism. I hope you take your pledges and stand with me, not for me, with me. I need you all on board. I cannot do this alone. Thank you so much for having me, Uzo.
Wow.
You all.
Nelly Quinish, check her out, everyone, on Twitter, on Instagram. If you go to any of the Mohammed Hassan rallies, she's there speaking. If you go to any of the Moyed Bashir protests, you will see Nelly. If you talk about Christopher Kapesa, you will see Nelly. Nelly is a voice you cannot forget. In 2020, 2021, stand up against and protest against racism. She is a fighter, and we absolutely adore Nelly. Thank you so much, and thank you for sticking to time. I have to introduce you, Minister, because I am too excited, not just because I work for you, and I see you on a day-to-day, 11 p.m., 12 midnight, worrying about the people of Wales and fighting hard to change behavior, not just change the narrative, but change the behavior. Jane Hott, everybody knows her. And for many, many years, one of the first who served in the Senate 20 years ago, one of the founding devolution ministers, and who has single-handedly, literally led the campaign to have the Race Equality Action Plan throughout the pandemic in 2020. The minister, deputy minister and chief whip came round every single platform, to the Privilege Cafe, to all the clubs, to East's events, to Race Alliance events. If you did any event, she was there to hear us, and led the Welsh government's response is to declare that they want to see Wales to be an anti-racist Wales. This would not have happened without the decision and leadership of Jane Hott MS. And I want people to remember that through the battles she has had to fight in and out to make this happen, she has been consistent and resolute in defending peoples of all nations, Black, white, Asian, minority ethnic, Eastern European, it doesn't matter which skin color, but she has taken that stand, and her team have made this work happen for the whole of Wales. I think this is her legacy to people of Black, Asian, and minority ethnic people across Wales. I want you all to remember her. Please warmly welcome our phenomenal, inspirational Deputy Minister and Chief Whip, Jane Hott MS. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Uzo. I mean, I'm still reeling and from the wonderful words from Queen Nish as well. And thank you for your very warm words, Uzo. But I have to say that every time I hear Queen Nish, I hear Nelly, that I learn so much every time, and it re-inspires and recommits us all, doesn't it? So Queen Nish, you are needed day in, day out to keep us there together. We need equality to end racism. So I'm also very pleased that the First Minister, Mark Drakeford, has also been with you to start the day off, because we're here to launch the zero tolerance policy to racism in Wales. I mean, it's absolutely crucial that we're welcoming this commitment to delivering zero tolerance to racism. But it's as you said, and everyone is saying, it's in our day-to-day lives, in our workplaces, in wider society. It just has to drive us day in, day out. Those of us, all of us in our individual lives, but particularly those of us with any responsibility. We need unity to end the division, as Nelly has said. And we've been learning over the last year in the Welsh Government and as individuals, it's no longer enough to say you are non-racist. We must be actively anti-racist. We must commit to continually thinking and responding to the potential impacts of our structures, our policies and practices, and the impacts on our Black, Asian and minority ethnic people and communities. And we can only do that if we are listening and learning and open every day to understand what it means, what it must mean, and prove that we are striving to be anti-racist, because you have to strive for these things. And Anti-Racist Wales is built, the Race Equality Action Plan that I'm launching next week is built on the policies and values of anti-racism. So this is really a few words from me, because you've got so many great speakers today about our Race Equality Action Plan. Because I think we would always say, of course we would, over the last 2 decades, and before I came into, before devolution, I once chaired a local government committee I set up on race equality many decades ago. We've always said that we were tackling racism and promoting race equality, but we know that we have got to address these issues much more fundamentally now. There's an urgent need for action. It was laid bare and intensified by the killing of George Floyd and also by the impact of COVID-19. So it is the time for change. And our vision for Wales, and that's what will come out of today, is that we should be proudly anti-racist, where everyone is treated as an equal citizen. And we want to make meaningful changes to the lives of Black, Asian, minority ethnic people in a transparent and open way where everyone can benefit from this, and respecting the rights of every citizen of Wales. If we can implement this plan successfully, and I can see Professor Manuel Ogbonna here, who's been guiding us, steering this with the Permanent Secretary. It's about implementation, about accountability. Are we going to deliver on this plan? Is it going to be just another plan? We need a fairer employment market to improve not just equality, but also productivity and growth opportunity. We need a fairer education and training system, harnessing everyone's potential, particularly members of ethnic minority communities who may have younger populations whose skills and abilities will contribute to overcoming the impacts of an aging population. We need to equalise racial inequalities and outcomes in health and other social services to help reduce the impact on the state and on our people and communities, and help to promote active citizenship. We all stand to benefit from being an anti-racist society. So just on our plan, it will be very practical, specific actions for key policies. I'm so grateful for everyone who's been involved in co-creating this. We've worked together, people coming into the Welsh Government, the local community groups. We've always welcomed your views, and you have an impact on this draft plan, but it will be out for consultation very shortly. And we need you to own that plan and take it forward as we move into an election period and beyond. So thank you very much to everyone who's played their part to bring us to this point today. I mean, this is so important that we get this understanding in the community, in our workplaces, about what it means to have zero tolerance to racism in our day-to-day lives. And I think just to finish with some of Queen Nish's words, of course, we are aiming for the stars. Let's stand together and start a new chapter. Let's show that we have in Wales mutual respect and kindness and compassion, that we can overcome barriers to social inclusion, and we provide the basis on which we build an anti-racist Wales where Black lives matter. Diolch yn fawr I chi gyd. Hwyl.
Thank you so much, Minister. I want to thank the Minister on behalf of all the organizations around the Wales Race Forum platform for your leadership, for your tenacity, for your refusal to give up on all the diverse peoples of Wales, white Welsh, Black Welsh, Asian Welsh, Eastern European Welsh. You've made us your priority, and we thank you. We will not forget. And we wish you all the very best and hope you can come back and continue to do what you have been doing and what you've started, this anti-racism plan, to see it through. That would be really wonderful. And now the keynote speaker we have secured from the United Nations, the wonderful Catherine White, is with us in this house, a dynamic young woman, a passionate young woman who was snatched early by the United Nations for her intelligence, for her tenacity, for her courage, for her leadership. She's working with the Black History Wales Collective to roll out a brand new mentoring and coaching project called Sisters Like Me and Brothers Like Me. It's about to be announced. So brace yourselves. And she is a change agent for this generation, a wonderful young person speaking from the UN of her experiences. And her title is We're Standing at the Crossroads, Resilience, Organization, and Black Women's Ongoing Fight. Welcome warmly, Catherine White.
Thank you so much, Professor Uzo. Thank you, everyone. I'm so inspired. I'm delighted to be with you today and to be with you on this amazing occasion of the launch of Zero Racism Wales. You're doing such incredible work, and I'm delighted to be joining you. So I really want to speak to you, and I'm conscious of time, so I'm already wanting to say so much, but I really want to talk to you today about Black women and the role that Black women play in fighting race discrimination. So at the UN, I work specifically as a gender expert and gender advisor, so I'm already constantly thinking about gender, but I want to specifically talk about when race and gender come together, because that's something that I'm really passionate about. And Uzo's already highlighted the background of the UN Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. So I won't go into that in too much detail, but I will just flag one thing that she mentioned, which was that the majority of those killed were women and children. And I just want us to keep thinking about that as I talk today. So of course, since that day was launched and was kind of founded, we know that in theory, apartheid system has been abolished. In theory, racist laws and practices have been abolished in many countries. We know that the UN has built an international framework for fighting racism. And as I speak today, the convention is now nearing universal ratification. But does that theory reflect the reality of the lives that many of us live every single day? Has policy yet been turned into practice? And I think in many regions and many places in the world, many communities, many societies, just many individuals, we still suffer. We suffer from the injustice and stigma that racism brings. And when I talk about standing at the crossroads, I want to talk about the fact that Black women in particular sit at the heart of this crossroads where we see race and we see sex, we see gender, we see nationality, we see sexual orientation, religion, all of these different paths cross and they meet, and Black women frequently sit in the middle. So to kind of, to put that in another way, what I mean is that while all of those experiencing racism carry their load, Black women face a unique burden that is still too frequently overlooked. This last week in the UK, we faced a national reckoning at this senseless murder of an innocent woman who was just walking home. I'm sure, like me, you're deeply affected by this. Women are not safe on our streets. That's clear. That's always been clear to me as a young woman. But let me ask you to think about this. Do women become more or less safe if you add in another rock to their load, another path at the crossroads? And this time, let's, for example, use the path of race. And the answer is that, of course, they become less safe as they fight these dual battles of sexism and racism. And we can apply any other intersection there. So of course, most of us will agree that we've made progress. And today, it, for example, highlights the amazing journey that is being traveled, but we still have a long way to go. So I want to talk particularly about how Black women are at the heart of this change. They're at the heart of organizing, of getting together, creating a resistance to all of the harmful narratives, the laws, the oppressions that we have been facing as we stand at this crossroads. And for centuries, we know that Black women have been overlooked, we've been downtrodden, we've been dismissed, we've been sexualized, racialized, sometimes just ignored. And that is a problem that culture has often portrayed Black women as a monolith and in terms of victimhood. And yet actually, that Black women behind the scenes, behind the stereotypes, are organizing, are resisting, and are fighting the burdens that are placed on them. We now have a Black woman in the White House. So that tells you something about the community organization that's been going on. So today, on this special day, I put it to you that it is time for us to change the narrative And to use a phrase from Professor Uzo, who I admire so much, we need to raise the gaze of Black women. When she told me that, I almost fell back in my chair. Raise the gaze. We need to look up, celebrate the work, highlight the achievements, and look forwards. We need to look forwards. So to quickly tell you what I mean when I talk about the crossroads, it was founded by Professor Kimberly Crenshaw, as she coined the term intersectionality, which just describes how race, class, gender, all of these characteristics intersect and overlap. And it started its life as a legal term, and she used it to argue that by treating Black women as purely women or as purely Black, then the courts would ignore the specific challenges that they face as a group. So for me, intersectionality is it's about making the invisible visible. And this word visibility is something that I really want us to hold on to. So as we talk about making Black women visible, as we talk about this day of launching Zero Racism Wales, raising the gaze of so many of us in this call, so many of us in the community, we need to see that we're not in an equal society. And the coronavirus pandemic is a great example of this. We've started from a point of inequality, it's exacerbated it further. And those standing at the heart of the crossroads are facing a particular and unique challenge. And I just quote here a report from the Economic Policy Institute last year found that Black women were the least likely group to be able to continue working from the safety of their homes. So as well as suffering record numbers of job losses and all of the economic devastation and trauma that goes with that, they're also disproportionately found among the essential workers. So continuing to go to their workplace, risk their health, risk their lives, risk that of their families in order to survive. And yet when we talk about working class, for example, and talk about what that means and the challenges that faces, we actually typically imagine, well, in my experience, we typically imagine probably a white man from the north working a manual labourer job. So of course, when you think about the disproportionate impact of the crisis, it suggests that we need to rethink our definition. And, working class in the UK today might look far more like a Black single mother working multiple frontline jobs. It might look like Belly Majinga, who is no longer here because she worked the sort of public-facing, hands-on job that meant she wasn't guaranteed the safety that is wrapped around an office worker like a blanket. She didn't have that. So intersectionality is not just an option, it's vital, because recognizing intersectionality is to make Black women visible. So with this in mind, let's look forward. How do we move? And the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights spoke about the International Decade for People of African Descent as an opportunity. And she said that it provides us with an opportunity to pay tribute to the outstanding achievements of millions of Black women. And I think that is where our attention should be focused as we move forward. We need to look not at the trauma, because that's there, we live it every day, but we need to look at the opportunity. And as we move forwards with this initiative and with this day where we say zero tolerance to racism, let's continue to put Black women at the heart of that, and particularly moving away from the stereotypes that put them in this box. 200 years ago, it was the mammy who was paid to raise white children before going home at night to tend to her own. And today, as I've said, it's these single mothers raising households, it's the carers, it's the nurses, but we put them in a box and we say that they don't care, they don't hurt, they don't feel pain because they're strong. And this strong Black woman isn't real, she is a myth. And we need to recognize that, and we need to abolish it because it's harmful. And being strong, it can mean a number of things. It can mean making a choice. Being strong can mean saying no to expectations. And pushing this narrative of strength means that we see Black people as strong before we see them as human. And there are so many statistics I could quote here. I'll just bring one, which is that Black women in the UK are 5 times more likely to die in childbirth than white women. And that is a direct consequence of seeing Black women as strong. They're literally bleeding to death in hospital beds because we see them as strong before human. So yes, Black women are not victims, but nor are we superheroes. It hurts when we bleed, and we need to recognize that. So where do we go from here? How do we ensure that Black women and girls are able to develop their personal, their academic, their professional skills on an equal basis, free from all of these limitations of gender and racial stereotypes and prejudices, all of the paths of the crossroads? How do we move forwards? Firstly, I think participation. We know that in the UK, people of the global majority, especially women, are historically underrepresented in a political level, at many other levels. And I think this is a really good place to start, wherever we can, to ensure that Black women have a seat at the table, because then we're automatically taking into account these different paths and these different realities and needs. But also, as Professor Uzo mentioned, we are really excited I can talk briefly about this initiative that we will be launching. And this is something that I think is an example of what we can do. So we'll be working to implement a leadership and mentoring program to precisely do this, to raise the gaze, to ensure participation, to say that you matter. We talk about Black Lives Matter. Let's put our money where our mouth is. Let's say you matter. So this program is going to be a community support and empowerment and a leadership initiative designed to amplify the voices and to offer opportunities to young women and girls across the African and Caribbean diaspora in Wales. So we'll be investing in them, in reaching out to them, telling them they matter, that we see them, that we will raise them as leaders. I've said so many times, I stand on the shoulders of giants. Many of whom, my mum, my aunties, my nan, they're a tribe of powerhouse Black women raised in Newport, and they taught me that I can go out there and I can be the change that I want to see in the world. And I believe that all of us, Queen Niche, my goodness, I'm so happy I've met you. You've changed my world in 10 minutes. But I believe that us young people, us young Black women, we have a responsibility to recognize that we stand on the shoulders of giants. Our foremothers, they taught us that we are visible, and we're here in this call because someone at some point said to us, you matter. And I think as we continue to stand at the crossroads and move onwards and upwards and continue this fight, we all need to raise our gaze, as Professor Uzo said, and recognize that the world is our oyster and there is a celebration here and we are just getting started. Thank you. I will close there.
Catherine, you brung it, sister. You brung it, as we say. You paid tribute absolutely appropriately to Pastor Hadassah Radwe, your aunt, Sister Barbara Paulette, your aunt, your mom, and all the people who nurtured you as young people. And today you've come back to the Black history community in Wales to say, I want to give back. I want to show and shine the light on how I made it to the UN and what is the pathway for other young people to go. You're an absolute icon and we celebrate your work. And I am so excited that you came up with that idea to nurture other young mixed heritage Black people, people like you. And hopefully that will be a prototype that could run through all the diverse backgrounds that we have in our world today. It's a change, it's a leadership initiative that will bring change. And you have spoken like a true UN advocate. We welcome you and we salute your words. Thank you so much. Now over to the words from our very own no need to be introduced, Cindy Ikie, our Black Lives Matter National Campaign Manager for Wales. Over to you, Cindy Ikie. Change our lives once again.
I am Cindy Liz Ikie. I am the National Campaigns Manager for Black Lives Matter Wales and its collective. It is a pleasure to be here today and to produce this video in my absence. I hope that it finds you well. And I hope that these important messages of policing find you well and ready to take action in whatever way you can. The United Kingdom has had a number of opportunities to address the issues of institutional racism of its police force. By now, it should be highly embarrassing that any individual who was not even yet in existence at the time of the Scarman report that followed the Brixton riots of 1981 should have to remind institutions of authority of that report's existence. Even then, it was being reported. Scarman communicated that issues of deprivation, unemployment, depressing environments, housing stress, and ill-suited education systems, as well as absence of leisure facilities and recreational spaces, were severe amongst Black communities, and that the police were falling short of building trust within those communities. Indeed, there was little to no work done to quash suspicions that policing was being carried out with the basis of racial prejudice. And despite the fact that that report has a lot of outdated language that I would never recommend you use today, Scarman was indeed a product of his time in that respect, but he was also able to look beyond his time and offer ways of resolution. He suggested police reform. He suggested new methods of policing, and he suggested that positive discrimination be put in place so that there wouldn't be such a racial disadvantage. It should be of very deep shame that any individual, such as myself, was but 7 years old at the time of the Macpherson report. And it's a shame that it is me, on behalf of Black Lives Matter Wales, that is reminding those in authority of that time that there was another opportunity that arose for change. Missed opportunity after missed opportunity to recognize and accept racism and race relations as central features of investigations and outcomes, or at the very least, in stop and search and arrest of Black people. The continuity of the constant lack of action to address and take accountability in a full and transparent way edges the public closer and closer to the notion that Macpherson may have been too graceful to even put this systematic and systemic discrimination to thoughtlessness, raising in the minds of the public the question, are these structures being upheld intentionally? As decades of notice have been given to help usher change, as nothing specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, or time-based is done to resolve these issues raised around the palpable infringement on Black people's human rights to dignity, fairness, equality, respect, and independence. Without referring to any one case in particular because of our deep, unwavering respect of their affected families, we see that an attitude of disrespect, humiliation, brutality in the form of excessive force, or the disproportionate application of force on Black people filters out into other vulnerable groups. Groups made vulnerable because of their race, or gender, or beliefs, and many other protected characteristics. Oftentimes, intersectional these people are in their identity, and suffering more generally and greatly at the hands of police for their intersectionality. How can the institution of police be confidently charged with upholding and maintaining law and order when there is a seemingly cheap use of words and tangible lack of action concerning Black people when it comes to their human rights and the Equality Act? We have been inundated with the distressing facts surrounding Black people and the police. Disproportionate stop and search, disproportionate sentencing, disproportionate incarceration, disproportionate death in custody. The disproportionality is not one-off. It's not a one-off. It is ever present from one point in time to the next. It has not gone unnoticed, but yes, it still remains. It infringes on Black people's human rights and breaks laws of the very land in which we live by the system designed to have respect for that very same law. It is the net result of the institutional racism that exists in the police force today across the UK, and even so in Wales. Black Lives Matter Wales have called for robust anti-racism training, the implementation of recommendations of the Macpherson report, the revision of stop and search so that it no longer oppresses Black people predominantly and is in fact not used as a tool of oppression to any person of any protected characteristic. And we've called for the police force to take up positive discrimination to urgently diversify leadership positions to reflect Black communities and other ethnic minority communities specifically, without the tokenism that results in one person from one race being expected to cover the needs of all the diverse people that Wales is so lucky to have. Because the reality is, we are not an acronym. We deserve better from our police force, and our Black human rights should be respected both indirectly and directly in every policy within policing. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so very much. We are very grateful to Cindy for highlighting that the Zero Racism Partners and Black Lives Matter will be calling out the police service on how it has been handling some of these cases that have affected people that we know. We think about people like Sianda, we think about people like Mohammed Hassan, we think of people like Moyed Bashir, we think of all the people like Christopher Kapesa. We want to see more transparency, more accountability. And if you sign this policy, you will be held accountable. So there will be a calling to order that will follow this event, where they actually have very strong conversations with the leaders who have signed the Zero policy on racism. And the risk is being removed from that list, because not everybody can stay on if you're not going to be prepared to make a change. So without much ado, we are grossly over time. May I warmly welcome the National Museum of Wales, the Chief Executive, David Anderson, who is absolutely wonderful at leading the change and promoting the equality that we so want to see, promoting Black, Asian, and minority ethnic people, promoting the collection and the display of Black Lives Matter initiatives that has arisen this year. And a warm welcome to Nia, Shoned, and Naz, all of you from the museum. Thank you for being here. Over to you.
Thank you, Uzo. I'm honoured to be invited to speak at this historic event, and in a moment to introduce my colleague, Nazir Adam. As Uzo said, the museum has committed to the zero tolerance policy, and we do acknowledge and we are aware that we will be held accountable for that as well. The purpose of museums is not just to collect, but to collect for equality. The purpose of museums is not just to record activism, but also to support it. I want to thank some of my colleagues, as you've mentioned, Uzo, Nazir, Shoned, and Nia in this meeting, and others, for the work they have done. But as Director of Amgueddfa Cymru, I take personal responsibility that we've failed to do enough so far, and that I am personally accountable for making change as well. We have a long journey to take as a museum. It will make us a better museum in every way, for everyone. And I now want to hand over to Nazir, our curator of Black history.
Okay, Brida, hi everyone, and wow, what a panelist. I mean, how could I follow Catherine, Nelly, our own Queen Niche? It's so empowering, and thank you, Uzo, as well for organising this and inviting us. Such an amazing, I've just feel overwhelmed actually, because I too was raised by a powerful woman in Bhutan, Tiger Bay, and surrounded by the most largest of characters and extraordinary people in Tiger Bay, such as the late Betty Campbell, the late Patty Flynn, all these people that, you know, I get the joy to stand on their shoulders, and actually I had the privilege of working with them. So in terms of myself, I think Black communities in Wales has a lot to be proud of, and not just for their contribution here in Wales, but throughout the world. And I'd like to say now is not the time for modesty. We have to raise awareness of Black people's achievements, both within our community and nationwide. So we do this by in the traditional African way, which is by telling their stories. My name is Nazir Adam. I'm the Black history creator at the National Museum of Wales. I'm a Untitled Cymru, based in St. Fagans. Now you could tell a great deal about a nation by what it deems important enough to remember. You know, what elements of the country's identities are featured in its national museums and in our national galleries. So I believe it's so important that we recognize and the contribution and the presence of diverse communities here in Wales. We need to address this historical amnesia that exists and remind all communities, especially our young people, in this pivotal time. Now we see young people taking action, whether it's social justice, whether it's BLM, whether it's climate crisis. It overwhelms me to see that young people are leading the way in this change. So we need to instill and inspire pride in our communities among young Black people, and especially to help confront the problem of racial discrimination through a greater understanding by making Black past and Black current accessible and meaningful to broader communities. At this pivotal time in history, when many people are taking collective action for change, we believe that there hasn't been a more crucial time for the National Museum of Wales in contemporary collecting. We have to be rapid in terms of the way that we collect our collections, and also we need to embed ourselves. I'm so glad that we've got Queen Nish here, who was part of the National Senate. Her speech was just so overwhelmingly powerful, and I'm glad that we've got Queen Nish in part of our collection now, in terms of her oral history, but the placards, her photographs. But not only for Queen Nish, we've collected so many placards. So here are some examples. We've seen No Justice, No Peace. That's me at the Senate steps, collecting all the collection. But I'm so proud that the National Museum of Wales actually took part in the demonstration itself, and actually was among the speakers at the event. That we supported it. This is it. It's about taking action. It's not only just about being rhetoric and just in words. It's about taking action and about being rapid in our responses to collect contemporary, because we are living through history, and this is a fundamental point that we need to collect as much stories and histories as possible as to why people are standing up. And I feel so privileged in the way that, I call myself both an insider and outsider within the museum, because I'm part of the community, but also I'm part of this, the national institution. So some of the ways that we do this is by allowing communities, and sorry, that's another picture of the event, and I love that placard next to it. I think that's one of my favorites in terms of looking at especially what's happening in nowadays about women and the empowerment of women. So how do we do this within the museum? It's about allowing access and learning resources for the communities, valuing our communities, valuing the community input and what's being generated and by whom, and at what cost. And about ownership, giving ownership to communities in terms of own spaces. And one of the things that we always discuss is about engaging. It's not about only engaging, but it's actually embedding ourselves in communities. So we know exactly what is happening within our local communities, but actually for our museum to be outside within communities, and working with key partnerships such as Race Council of Cymru and other organisations and grassroots organisations. It's so important that we do this in collaborative way, but also giving validity, giving value to people who give their objects to the museum. And also reflecting and empowering ourselves, but also reflecting within our museum as well on how we conduct ourselves, how we do, as creators. I know things are changing at the moment. So it's really about that. I just really wanted to signify. And these are some of the things that once we, give ownership and value to communities, these are the sort of pictures, we look at the Somali Heritage event. Now the Somali community is over 200 years in Cardiff. When we give them the ownership and celebrating their own heritage, their own Welsh heritage and Somali heritage, it was one of the most beautiful days that we've seen, young people taking panelist discussion about what it means to be a Welsh Somali, and living in Wales. We've got the Black History 360, which should be celebrated, every single day, every moment. And also, we said the first time we actually followed Ramadan, and we got Ramadan coming up in the next month, following different mosques and actually seeing how communities gel together when they come together, and just the ownership and the pride that communities are willing to provide, museums and give us a lot of activities. But one thing that I really want to leave behind, which is so important, is a quote from Stuart Hall, which really resonated with me. I heard this in a conference in Edinburgh, which encapsulated issues around representations in museums and collections. So if I just read it out, even so-called civic states like Britain are deeply embedded in specific ethnic and cultural meaning, which give the abstract idea of a nation as a lived content. It follows that those who cannot see themselves reflected in the mirror cannot properly belong. That's what I wanted to really say, is that unless communities see themselves in our national spaces, our public spaces, they're not going to feel belong. And actually, this is one thing that I'm really proud of. I'm privileged and honored that we've got our David Addison, all our heads of the museum who want to make a change and not only speak the words of change, but actually adopt and take action. And that's
Thank you.
Yeah.
So sorry, Naz. Thank you so much. Naz is so passionate, and I know he has so much more he could say. The museum, we love you all. We thank you for your work with every single one of us, with Black History, with East, with all the various, the Black Lives Matter, all the groups, the African community, all the groups that you have around you. We celebrate you. We thank you. Keep doing that work. We look forward to when we can walk through to see the change that you have implemented. Thank you. So right away, we go to our fabulous Race Equality First. We've got Christina Tanti and Anna Petrie from Race Equality First to give us an overview of the shadow report for the CERD. So they're going to talk to us about this commission from the UN to produce a comprehensive report showcasing what's happening across Wales. Over to you, Christina.
Thank you very much, Patience. Thank you, and thank you very much for inviting us to speak today, Patience and Uzo. I'm going to share my screen and we're going to give a presentation on what we do at Race Equality First, and that's going to include what the work that we're working on at the moment for the CERD Shadow Report. Okay, so Race Equality First has 45 years of experience as the recognised lead body in South Wales for tackling discrimination and hate crime and promoting the message that race equality is a human right. On this slide here, we just have an overview of the services that we offer at Race Equality First, and we're going to talk about a few of these in some more detail now. Just briefly then, we have the team at REF, and we're quite a small team. One thing that you can see from the screen, we used to only cover Cardiff and Newport, but now we have ASMs in all of the 4 regions in Wales. Moving on to our services, Anna's going to talk about our hate crime and discrimination casework service first.
Thanks, Christina. As a part of our hate crime and discrimination casework service, we provide a holistic service from the first call all the way to court to assist victims of discrimination and hate crime. So within our discrimination cases, this could include assisting with a complaints procedure and claims of discrimination, whether that be in a workplace or in a public service, giving guidance on what to expect throughout the process, and representing victims at court. We always try to resolve the matter at the earliest possible stage locally through informal and formal mediation procedures to try and identify a suitable resolution for both parties, as escalating the matter to a civil court can be a long and stressful process for the victim and does not guarantee any positive outcome. However, sometimes that can't be achieved, and if that is the case, we would then support victims throughout the court process to help them achieve justice. Similarly, within the hate crime element of the service, we can report the incident to the police on behalf of the victim if required. We can collect evidence such as witness statements. We liaise with the police, and we would also attend for the victim's statement as support for the victim. And within this, we assist with any language, cultural, religious, or gender barriers. We try to resolve any communication issues between the police and the victim, and we can follow up the matter with the police and be that critical friend. We also advise on the criminal justice process and attend court to support the victim. We would also assist the victim with putting in a complaint to the police if they're not happy with the handling of the case.
I'll just briefly talk about our hate crime justice gap research as well that we're working on at the moment. So within our hate crime and discrimination casework service, we're also working on a research project into the experience of victims of race and religion hate crime in the criminal justice system in Wales. So victims of hate crime face a staggering justice gap with at least with less than 1 in 10 hate crimes resulting in a prosecution, despite the number of hate crimes that are reported to the police being at a record high in 2019 to 2020. Over 105,000 reported across England and Wales, and over 4,000 reported in Wales. For this research, we're working closely with the police and the CPS to analyse race and religion hate crime cases. From conducting this research, we want to understand the factors that impact on hate crime victim satisfaction with the criminal justice system, and we want to identify the gaps in the criminal justice system to achieving satisfactory outcomes for victims of hate crime. Ultimately, we're hoping that the research will address the hate crime justice gap with some form of harmonisation within existing hate crime legislation, which improves the current difficulty of proving the hostility element of a hate crime. Moving on from that, Race Equality First has recently been contracted to write the joint NGO shadow report for Wales on the state of racial inequality in Wales, to be submitted to the UN Committee for the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination, so the CERD Committee, and this is to help inform their forthcoming review. Around every 5 years, the committee reviews how well each state, which has agreed to follow the ICERD International Human Rights Treaty, is putting into practice the rights in ICERD. Civil society organisations engage throughout this process by either submitting or contributing to a shadow report, and the shadow report will set out an alternative fact-based view of the measures taken by the UK and Welsh governments to implement the committee's recommendations to combat and eliminate racial discrimination. So far, within this project, we've launched a call for evidence, and we have invited written contributions. And we've also run a number of consultation events to discuss the salient issues civil society organisations in Wales feel need to be referenced in this report. Our call has now closed, and we're currently in the stage of reviewing the evidence and putting together the first draft of the report, and that will be shared with those who contributed to the evidence gathering stage of the process for feedback sometime next month. Following that, we will review the feedback, and it will inform the final draft of the report, which will be submitted to the UN. However, as a result of the pandemic, the timings for the final submission to the UN are currently uncertain. So that, in a nutshell, explains the third shadow report that we're working on and where we currently stand.
We also run an advocacy service where we offer assistance to Black and minority ethnic communities across Wales. Within this, we assist beneficiaries with benefits and housing applications. We also aim to reduce inequalities that Black and minority ethnic people experience in healthcare in Wales by assisting with access to an interpreter and or transportation to a medical appointment. We aim to combat loneliness and isolation through offering fitness and wellbeing activities. However, during the pandemic, a lot of our groups have had to be paused. Also, during the pandemic, we've helped beneficiaries gain access to food, as well as reduce digital exclusion faced by many Black and minority ethnic children through helping them gain access to laptops and tablets to complete schoolwork from home. And we also signpost individuals to specific services if they can better meet the needs of the beneficiary.
We've literally run out of time, sorry.
That's fine, that's no problem. We were just going to talk about training, but there's no worries at all. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much. You guys did an absolutely fabulous whistle tour. So guys, get engaged with all the organizations that have pulled together to make this event happen, including Race Equality First, including all the other organizations that have spoken before Wales TUC. Please get involved. Right away, I'm going to move straight into the next one. Our fabulous sister, Suzanne Duval. If you want to talk about leadership, and leadership on Black, Asian, minority, ethnic mental health issues, understanding it. Suzanne, from as far back as Awetu, was leading this national work. We celebrate your work in Diverse Cymru. Please talk to us about the disproportionate impact for Black people with dementia and mental health. Over to you, Suzanne.
Okay, and I want to say thank you so much, Uzo. I want to be able to follow that while you've praised me. Thank you so much to the ministers, to Uzo, to patients, and everyone for making today possible. I am so impressed and inspired by everything that everyone has contributed, and I thank you as well for even consideration for inviting me to this most important event. And thank you for that fabulous welcome. So I said, what do we mean by dementia, mental health? I was going to go into a bit of more speech, but I'll just say, I think you all know anyway, the word dementia describes a set of symptoms that may include memory loss and difficulties with thinking, problem solving or language. And for mental health, we know the significant numbers of Black people in mental health detention in the United Kingdom. In 2016 and 17, known rates of Mental Health Act 1983 detention in the Black or Black British group were over 4 times, and rates of community treatment order use were almost 9 times that of the white group. Disparities for dementia and COVID. From discussing the dementia and mental health, how has coronavirus affected people with those issues? The coronavirus pandemic has revealed deep-seated inequities in healthcare for communities of colour and amplifies social and economic factors that contribute to poor health outcomes. Dementia overtook heart disease and stroke as the UK's biggest cause of death, and in 2017 as one of the top 4 causes of death, along with heart disease, stroke and lung cancer. As in the last slide, we see that dementia is the most common pre-existing condition for people who are dying from COVID-19. Well, in mental health, anxiety regarding the risks of COVID has also exacerbated mental health impacts. The issues underpinning this predate the pandemic. However, the situation over the last year has sharpened the focus on these inequalities. Mind Cymru's research report, The Mental Health Emergency, revealed that existing inequalities in housing, employment, finances and other issues have had a greater impact on the mental health of people from different Black, Asian and minority ethnic groups than white people during the pandemic. The mental health disparities that result from these issues are real and can and do have a significant impact on the lives of individuals, as can be seen from the following statistical information, which is based on information from the last comprehensive study of mental health practice in the UK from the Care Quality Commission Count Me In census. Having looked at these significant disparities, some key identified barriers are stereotypical views of Black people, systemic racism, cultural ignorance, and the stigma and anxiety associated with mental illness, often combine to undermine the way in which mental health services assess and respond to the needs of Black, Asian, and minority ethnic communities. Service users become reluctant to ask for help or to comply with treatment, increasing the likelihood of a personal crisis, leading in some cases to self-harm or harm to others. In turn, prejudices are reinforced and provoke even more coercive responses, resulting in a downward spiral, which in mental health are referred to as circles of fear, in which staff see service users as potentially dangerous and service users perceive services as harmful. From the extensive research available, the 2 key challenges identified that contribute to this inequity are those of cultural differences and unconscious bias. Importantly, these disparities are not only related to mental health, but apply to all sectors of public life. In August 2016, Theresa May, then as an MP before becoming the Prime Minister, announced the Race Disparity Audit, which set out to examine how people of different ethnicities are treated across public services by publishing data held by the government. Results of the audit were published in October 2017 on a purpose-built government website, which sets out the available data about ethnic disparities, including in education, employment, health, housing, and the criminal justice system. The point here is the systemic nature of these disparities in all sectors of public life, which in themselves can often lead to an increase in mental health challenges. Again, in many respects, these disparities are actually getting worse rather than better. The criminal justice system belongs to that list, which I will come into on my next couple of slides. As you saw in the previous slide, that I could pick up any of the public life categories to demonstrate the inequalities faced by Black people. But for today, I want to share my views and thoughts about the criminal justice system, which has a huge impact on mental health challenges for Black people. The problem of overrepresentation is especially acute in relation to Black children. The Justice for Kids law, or Children's Rights Alliance, has said, while the criminalisation of children of all ethnic groups has decreased in the last decade, The extent to which Black children and young people disproportionately targeted by the youth justice system has increased. Figures from the youth justice statistics in 2018-19 in England and Wales bear out this fact, despite only making up 4% of the 10 to 17-year-old general population. Black children were over 4 times more likely than white children to be arrested, almost 3 times more likely to be given a caution or sentence than white children, remanded in custody at a higher rate than white children, accounting for a third of children remanded in youth custody and given custodial sentences at a higher rate than white children. The number of children in youth custody from a Black background has increased by 6% in the last year and now accounts for 28% of the youth custody population. Moving on from the last slide of Black children, we now come to the deaths in custody. Black men are systemically labelled as dangerous, hostile and threatening, leading to the legitimisation of violence against them. Violence which, for our loved ones, was lethal. Again and again, we have seen officers justify brutal, unprovoked attacks on Black and Asian men with comments about how threatened they feel. In the recent years, 2015, there was the Shekubayo case. For the police, it seems the mere claim that they felt threatened is an instant get-out clause. It means they are allowed to kill us. Falklands War veteran Christopher Alder was 37 when he died on the floor of a police station in Hull, with officers standing around him making racist monkey noises, yet so few have heard of his story. He died in 1998 after he was arrested for breaching the peace outside a nightclub where he was punched and taken to hospital. CCTV showed officers drag his motionless body into the custody suite, where he was left handcuffed, gasping for breath for 11 minutes before dying. No attempts were made to seek medical help, despite one officer expressing concerns about asphyxiation. Audio footage from several officers stood around the paratrooper as he lay in his final moments recorded what is widely regarded to be monkey noises and racist slurs. In a further cruel turn of fate, the wrong body was released from the morgue when it came to him being laid to rest two years later. And the body of Grace Kamara, a Nigerian lady in her 70s, was instead buried in his place. His family didn't find out they had been mourning the wrong body until 11 years later, and the body of Ms. Kamara had to be exhumed. He was finally buried the following year, 14 years after his death. Despite an inquest ruling a verdict of unlawful killing, no individual or organisation has ever been officially held to account for what happened. The last time a police officer was successfully prosecuted in the UK concerning the death of somebody in custody was in 1969, when the Beatles were not only all alive, but still all together. We are still waiting to see what justice is given to Mohammed Hassan and Moeed Bashir. May they rest in peace. So what are we doing about what we have just witnessed? As can be seen from the reports above, in simple terms, the need stems from the recognised inequality in the services provided to the Black, Asian and minority ethnic service users accessing health services as compared to the non-Black, Asian and minority ethnic service users. The inequality covers, for example, all aspects of mental health service provision and has been highlighted in a wide range of reports and research data. And additionally, this inequality is also clear from all the statistical and evidential information available. Although inequalities in mental health outcomes for the Black, Asian, minority ethnic communities have been acknowledged as a real concern for decades, these disparities still remain, and rather than getting better, in many instances are in fact getting worse. This despite there having been a number of well-intended government and health board policy initiatives in trying to improve these disparities. Practically every report that has come out of the pandemic calls for culturally competent services for the Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities in service delivery across the board. The theme of cultural competence, defined as the ability of providers and organisations to effectively deliver services that meet the social, faith, cultural and linguistic needs of service users, is raised repeatedly by our communities. This is especially important as interventions to especially reduce the disproportionate impact of COVID-19 and the Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities who require a set of attitudes, perspectives, behaviours and policies, both individually and organisationally, that would promote and value positive and effective interactions with diverse cultures.
Sorry, we're out of time, sis.
Oh, I just got to do the last bit then. What have we learned? And just to say, this is our toolkit certification scheme you can see on our website. And I just want to say this, what have we learned? What can be taken forward? Despite acknowledgement of wider structural and systems level issues which need to be addressed, there's an overarching sense of enthusiasm to work together from all sectors and across all levels. Individuals and groups are keen to be involved in future work led by Welsh Government and other organisations, and there is much appetite for collaborative working. Systemic racism exists. It affects us as Black people disproportionately, and we need to do something about it now. COVID-19 did not create inequalities. These have been with us for such a long time, and we don't need more data or research to act. We must prevent any more harm being done, and we must act now. Thank you for taking time to listen to my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Suzanne. Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I rush right away? Right away, we move straight on to the absolutely powerful team at Show Racism the Red Card. We've got Ravina Croft to talk about the findings of Racism in Wales 2020 report and Show Racism the Red Card work in schools.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk a bit about just the work that we're doing, what we've been doing, and a report that we produced earlier last year now. So we are Show Racism the Red Card, and we the charity was started over 25 years ago by Shaka Hislop and Jed Grabby. The Wales office has been running for just over 15 years, and since then we've worked with approximately 160,000 children, young people and adults. So what do we do? A lot of people see the logo, Show Racism the Red Card, and they think that we work with footballers and go out and sort of talking about racism in football. We actually work, the majority of our work is carried out in schools. So we're educating children, young people, teachers, college students, lecturers about racism, having those conversations. And here I've got a picture of a session taking place. Now we do use footballers in our work. So we use the high profile status and role model kind of nature of sports stars to help tackle racism. So we've got here Cardiff City, Swansea, Dragons, all showing support and showing that they do not stand for, do not accept racism. And the children are really inspired by this. They like to see that the people they follow, the people they look up to do not tolerate racism. And we find that message really powerful. So we're also a bilingual charity, and our training is available in English and Welsh. So that means we're able to sort of really reach some Welsh-speaking communities in North Wales especially, and Carmarthenshire.
So for a long time, I didn't tell anyone. I just dealt with it. I got upset when things happened, but I didn't actually tell any teachers because I didn't really know how to, and also I didn't want to, you know, tell on people in the class. But eventually I went home one day and I was really upset, and I told my mum, and she obviously comforted me and told me there was nothing wrong with me. But I didn't realise then my mum had got in contact with the school, and she had no luck with that. There was no change, and no classes to educate anyone, just nothing at all. So eventually, which I wasn't aware of, my mum started researching and found Show Racism the Red Card, and got in contact with them and asked them if they could come into the school and just to educate the class, really, do a little talk on it. It's crazy, really, because it had a huge impact, bigger than my mum probably would have expected. So the workshop didn't target anyone. It was just a simple class on what racism is and the impacts, which I felt like the class really needed to hear. And after the workshop took place, actually a couple of boys from the class came to the front and actually apologised for some of the racist comments they had made, not realising how upset it made me and one other boy in my class feel. And weirdly enough, one of the girls that used to say racist comments to me quite often, we're really good friends now. So I felt like having that workshop really did make a huge impact and really educated the class on how serious it was. And obviously I got a friendship out of it now that I wouldn't have had. So yeah, I'm really glad that happened. After the workshop, I didn't actually have any more racism. So I feel like that workshop really paid off. Yeah, I felt like me and one of the girls that was a little bit racist to me, we got along a lot better. And yeah, just in general, since that workshop, while I was in that school, I didn't experience any more racism at all. So yeah, it made going to school a lot easier for me. Show racism the red card.
Wow.
Yeah, I just thought I'd share Hannah's story because for me that it's so inspiring for me to think that if we can make that difference to someone's life by going in there, educating the other children. Education is just so important for the children in our schools at the moment, and I think that is the way that, well, one of the ways I think we can make some real change. So I'm going to move on from that.
Sorry, you have literally 1 minute left.
1 minute, fine,
yeah,
okay. Oh no, that's fine. So maybe I'll go straight through. I was just going to talk about our research a little bit, and we've produced 2 reports because initially we just couldn't find any information about what it was like to be, what the situation was with racism in Wales in schools. So we've got 2 reports, follow-up report in May 2020. The findings, children using racist language in school, making comments, jokes and names calling, but we even saw that there were extreme cases of violence and awful incidents happening in schools in Wales. And we need to continue to educate young people about racism. We continue to educate teachers and school staff to ensure that they are confident and able to deal with racism, and continue to monitor what's going on in our schools to make sure that we can support children and schools to make a difference and try and fight against racism. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Ravina. That was incredible. The video of that young person, really touching. Thank you for the fabulous work that you all do. I want to just highlight, if you are on the screen or you're linked to an organization, you haven't signed the Zero Racism Policy, you can click on the link. I know that Adele, who's been absolutely brilliant at sharing it, has shared it again. Click on it and sign. You can sign as an individual. You can sign as an organization. If your name is not on the list, you're not even featuring at all. And I want to highlight that absolutely every single local authority have signed. Right over, straight over, away we go to the lovely, the absolutely phenomenal Stand Up to Racism Swansea duo. You've heard them, you've seen them, you've seen the fist pump in the air, you've seen the take the knee. It's all been led by Nemisha Trivedi and Martin Chapman. Please, could I beg you to shorten your talk to 6 minutes if you can help me? That would be so great. I'm about to lose my volunteered position as host because I can't keep to time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Uzo. It's just me, but thank you very much for that brilliant introductions. Really, really appreciate it. I'll make it very quick. and just few points really. No presentation, so just a quick few points. It's 22 years since the Macpherson report came out in terms of the Stephen Lawrence death and the inquiry around institutional racism in police force, and nothing much has changed. I'm sure people would recognize that, but that came because of the mass pressure from below, and that is something that I want to emphasize in terms of this debate we're having today about tackling institutionalized racism and the fight against racism. And it was because of that mass pressure that that call was made. And COVID-19 has shown that spotlight in terms of the inequalities and how it continues to affect people's lives, Black people's lives, in terms of all areas. And people before me have spoken about that very powerfully. Suzanne talked about that, some very powerful statistics around how Black people are affected by it in all areas. So there's two views, I'd say. Some people think that racism has to be tackled individually and it's a mindset, and that's how we do it, or it's going to be done through the system change. And I think both are equally valid. But I think what really matters more than anything is unity, that we all come together, do take that fight in a united front against institutionalized racism. And that starts with all of us here. And it starts with the recognition that institutionalized racism is in the very DNA of the government policies, of some of these institutions that we're talking about, of the local authorities, Uzo, that you talked about, in the education department, everywhere really. So, that is why we're here. I just wanted to sort of touch upon very quickly about, the brilliant BLM movement, which has inspired millions around the world. And again, lots of people have got involved for the very first time, and lots of white people have got involved for the very first time, recognizing that racism is here and they need to be part of that fight. And wasn't, when we talk about things like, part of this fight is the statutes which we've all talked about, which are upholding the slave owners, and what happened in Bristol when people took their action. And I know, people may have different views about it, but scandalously, those very people are now facing charges. I just want to highlight, Uzo, you was talking about different local authorities in Carmarthenshire, that big Picton massive monument, which still stands, I think is, it's pitiful response from that council when the Black community there have demanded to do something about that and remove it, because that represents, again, a story of a slave owner and that horrific story about what Picton represented. So that's the point I want to make. The other thing I just want to talk about is linking in about the stories of the refugees and the asylum and people who are seeking asylum. So again, the hostile environment that this government continues to promote around that, the Penally camp, which people are aware of in West Wales, horrific really, the conditions that people were brought in to stay in that camp, as people know, over 250 to begin with, has had some good news as a result of, again, the campaign from below of a united front from the local communities there, from Stand Up to Racism, from other anti-racist organizations. That camp is now closing, if people didn't know. So the people are being moved away from that camp. I hope that they're going to better places, better accommodation, better facilities and so on. But really that came as a result of that mass pressure and everybody getting involved in that. So I think unity is the key. When we're talking about fighting institutionalized racism, challenging racism in any shape or form, it's important that we come together like we are in this event today. I remember, the 70s where the National Front were very, very strong and trying to make gains in the elections. Organizations like the Anti-Nazi League played a part, were instrumental in tackling that. In the 1990s and the 2000s, again, when the BNP were trying to make gains, there was a fight against that by Anti-Nazi League and other organizations, and bringing it more to on time now, today, as we talk, is the UN Anti-Racism Day, which we are all here to mark. And that is on the 21st of March. But on the 20th of March, Stand Up to Racism, TUC and TUC Wales are calling for everybody to mark that day by taking the knee. It's going to be part of the football event. So Swansea and Cardiff Derby. So when the footballers take the knee at 5:29, a call is out for everybody to take the knee at the same time. And as you know, Uzo, you yourself, patient, you've been all part of that, promoting that. You've done the videos to do that, which we are sharing with everybody. It's really important that we do that. And please on your doorstep, wherever you are really, and do sort of pass it on to Stand Up to Racism Facebook page. I haven't got the link, I'm sorry. Maybe patients, you might be able to share that with people. But even just get in touch with the Stand Up to Racism Facebook page in Wales and we'll be able to sort something out. So it's very important. Tomorrow, the TUC are calling for a Twitter storm around the event as well. So that, you know, especially in workplaces, and that just I'll conclude with this really, Uzo, that in workplaces it's very important that at work, as workers, black and white, we come together to show our solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement, take a stand against racism, take the knee. Challenge in workplaces has to be the key. I'm a trade unionist myself. I'm in Unison, and it's fantastic that the trade unions have come on board with this movement. But just to say really that as Unison, as reps anywhere in the trade unions, when you are talking about fighting on your bread and butter issues, fight against racism has to be the key to it. So all the reps have to take up that fight and have to be the anti-racist reps in our workplaces. And I think, Uzo, when you talk about signing up to this pledge, you know, it is about taking that pledge, but it's actually putting that into action. And it's got to be done, you know, on a day-to-day basis, challenging institutionalized racism wherever it emerges. So yeah, that is it really. That's all I've got to say. But yeah, do remember taking the knee on March the 20th. And please post the pics as well. So
thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Share. Nimi says, take the knee, take your photograph, share on your social media, and hashtag support for Anti-Racism Wales. Well done. Over to you now, to the fantastic East team who are making strides and changes, and the Race Alliance Wales and their fabulous report that they have produced, which is really influencing change and talking about leadership and representation. Right away, I'm going to appeal to you. Keep it short, keep it real. Over to East and Race Alliance Wales. Go.
Good afternoon. I was going to say good morning. Buenos dias. Assalamu alaikum. My name's Layla. I got a bit confused there. I didn't know if it was East or Race Alliance Wales because we're two different organisations. So I'm here from Race Alliance Wales, and I think East is saying something afterwards, so I'll pass over to Amara after that. I wrote a speech because I had to prepare. I had 5 minutes. I thought I had 10 minutes. I was here to talk about the manifesto that Race Alliance Wales produced. I supported the production of it, but it was pulled together by our members. However, I'm going to digress a bit. Uzo, come in if I'm going too long. I'm going to start my timer. Keep an eye on that and try and keep it to 4 minutes. I might digress a bit, and I wanted to start by thanking and supporting what everyone said today, what people have said yesterday, what we'll be saying tomorrow, what we will say, you know, for time to come until things change. But as I've been listening over the last 2 hours, all I've been feeling is my sadness, my anger, my pain that's come to the surface, that's pricking at my eyes, that's tightening my jaw, that's shortening my breath. I need to take a deep breath. I work in this sector, yes. I work for Race Alliance Wales. We are an alliance. I work with you all, and I'm so proud. But I also live this every single day. I live this experience of racism, of sexism, and of other oppressions. So we've heard a lot. And I was going to read a quick quote by Ta-Nehisi Coates, which essentially is saying that we reflect, to breathe, to heal, and to remember that this is about real people. We've heard about so many of the real people this does impact. And I really like Catherine repeating what Uzo said about Black women must raise their gaze. So we don't have loads of time. I'm going to take 30 seconds and invite everyone to raise their gaze. Look at each other on this screen. Look at all the people here who are affected by racism. Look and realize that we're not alone. And for those of you here who are not affected by racism, look at us and realize that we are, and we are real people. You can see on the screen there, these are the 10 steps that encapsulate what the manifesto that Race Alliance Wales pulled together call for. And we will continue calling for them, together with Race Council Cymru, together with East, together with Stand Up to Racism, together with Show Racism the Red Card, together with all the individuals as well as organisations that are here today. We are living in unprecedented times, and these kind of gaps and differences in society are being exposed like never before through the pandemic. And through all the other things that have been going on recently. And in this context, we have a chance. We've had a moment to be able to pause more than 30 seconds. And we need to be bold going forward in our change. We need to be radical. We can't go back to business as usual, because business as usual was never in some people's best interests. If anyone ever remembers the age-old Animal Farm, it's been that we are all equal, but some are more equal than others. Let's make it that we are all equal. We recognise, we, Race Alliance Wales, everyone here and more people across Wales and the world, that we have been calling for this change for a long time. And in our manifesto, we do highlight some of the same recommendations that lie in other manifestos that are there in regard to race equality and the plight for equity for all. So our manifesto has 69 recommendations covering these areas. These are kind of 10 steps. They are available to have a look at. And we ask for, in this instance, Welsh Parliament, Welsh Government and public bodies to recognise that racial, ethnic, religious intolerance is systematic and institutional. Uzo mentioned the report that I led on representation in public and political life. Racism, in a direct sense, is happening in the Senedd. It is happening to councillors. It is happening in public bodies. It is not just happening on the ground. While you look to lead this country into an anti-racist nation, please don't forget to look at your political parties and at the places that you are sitting in as well. With 3 seconds left, we're also calling for an increase in measuring racial equality, in the plan for racial equality. And oh my God, I'm so excited to see the action plan come out next week, see what it encapsulates. And I do hope that it brings in everything that all of these organizations have been asking and people have been asking for years, because if not, then where have you been? Who have you been listening to? I will end with my last paragraph that I did prepare. So it says that we do stand united. And one thing, actually, I said this at our launch, this is where I've taken it from, because I've not been in a good place this week, was that last year, or when the last government, we had Carwyn Jones who announced a pledge to become a feminist government. It enabled a rapid review of gender equality policies. And he claimed and stated that wanted to make Wales the safest place for a woman to be in the whole of Europe. Today we heard Mark, which was amazing, state that we have to be an actively anti-racist government in Wales. So we call on whoever the next First Minister is to commit that we will become an anti-racist government, that we will become an anti-racist nation for racialized and other minoritized communities, so that it can be safe for women as well as everyone else. We want an anti-sexist government, an anti-transphobic government, an anti-homophobic government, an anti-ableist government, an anti-classist government, a true anti-racist government, because to strive for equity, you must strive for all. Thank you
so much.
I'll let you pass on, Uzo.
Thank you, Leila. That was spectacular. Amir, are you going to say a few words?
Yes, I'll be very short. Thank you, Auntie Uzo and Patience and everyone who's organizing. So my name is Amir. I'm the Youth and Participation Officer at East. And I've got a short piece prepared titled Young. I want to talk about the reality of Black and Brown children, Black and Brown people, young Black and Brown people. The reality is that our development is riddled with racism since birth. Our Black mothers are disproportionately die under childbirth. Our children grow up without mothers. In school, Muslim girls have had their headscarf pulled off at 9 years old. He never said sorry to me, she says. They're told to wear short skirts which are not in line with their traditions. In year 3, children of Afro-Caribbean background are called dirty skin. Young. In year 5, they are told to shut up, you Asian immigrant. Imagine the impact of all of that on a developing child. 13-year-old black boys are pushed and killed into rivers. Christopher Capassa say his name without justice. Young. People are not taught racism is wrong. Our history is only taught from the lens of slavery and colonization, but those are just symptoms of a non-inclusive curriculum. Decolonize our curriculum young. At university, we're not allowed to become doctors and nurses. I don't want to be seen by a doctor of this color. And the dropout rate lies at 50% for Black university students in Wales. We complain about racism, but nothing ever gets done. Our attainment gap is bigger than it ever was, but it's only a symptom of a disease young. We are seen as criminals by police who are not protecting us. Our killers roam free without prosecution for 20 years. Stephen Lawrence, say his name. Young, we are disproportionately stopped and searched, disproportionately experienced police use of force, disproportionately killed by the hands of police. Mahmoud Hassan, say his name. Our poor mental health gets treated like a crime, and our treatment is constantly being denied. Mahmoud Ayed Bashir, say his name. Young, our problem lies in institutions that are killing us, institutions that let victims go without justice, institutions that let victims become the perpetrators. Firisi Yanda, say her name. Young. Institutions are not going to silence us. 10 years for a peaceful protest, and this is only a symptom of a disease called institutional racism. We don't need words, surveys, and consultations. We need actions. In our 25 years on this earth as young, only 25 years, racism has infringed our development. Young, reform needs to happen now. We shout defund the police because in our conversations with them, they ask for evidence for police brutality, that they want victims to come forward, but that's not a commonality because we don't trust them. They shout, we want more diversity, but the problem lies in a culture where police are never prosecuted for their crimes. Criminals cannot be protecting our streets. Young and free, that's all we want. So sit down and listen to us. Don't deny, demand our justice because young Black lives matter.
Wow, that is a masterpiece. I have to say, we bow to the young. We bow to the young. I'm telling you, you caught the feeling for every single person around this room. And we thank you for holding that for. You said you speak for young people. You did it. So thank you. We're seriously out of time, but we want to publish that poem. Unison, Cymru, Tony McLean, you have always stood up for Black Lives Matter. You've always stood up for Black History Wales. You've always supported everything that we do to promote equality. Please, we celebrate you for being a partner. Go, Tony McLean. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Tony McLean, and I'm proud to represent Unison Cymru Wales, Black self-organised group in support of the UN Day Against Racism. This annual event acts as a reminder that we should be rooting out all forms of racism and racial discrimination that some Black people encounter every day of their lives. The theme of this year's UN Day Against Racism is Youth Stand Up to Racism. Education, I feel, is a major key in challenging racism, and I'd like to see all the schools, both primary and secondary, reflect the great contributions made by Black people. PSC lessons should promote cultural awareness and an insight into the diversity of people living in communities around the UK. But education shouldn't just continue in school, it should also be carried on at home, where we as parents, siblings, cousins, aunts and uncles should take on the responsibility of talking to the younger generation about racism and how it affects people, lives, prosperity and outlooks. It would be great if the diversity in football could transcend across areas of employment. I remember as a young boy, when all young lads, I guess, when you watch the FA Cup final or a certain football match, you then want to go to the leaders' field, pick up football, and you all want to emulate stars of the day. Back in my day, there were very, very few Black people playing professional football, and therefore very few Black players in the UK you might see on TV. So the only person I can recall at the time was a guy called Clyde Best. He was a striker that played for West Ham. He's one of a tiny proportion of black players playing pro football at the time, and he's the only one I could look up to during the time that I used to sort of want to go out and play football and emulate those stars. Obviously, show my age a bit there, but the point made, since those days, pro football has come on leaps and bounds, and our football league is awash with black players that young people of all colours want to emulate. It'd be great, as I said earlier on, if the diversity in the football could transcend across all areas of employment. We should try and celebrate and champion those black people that have achieved great success in their careers from a variety of different occupations and use them as a beacon of hope for the young generation. We need to inspire the young black generation to chase their dreams and shatter glass ceilings, not settle for second best, not accept what's been offered to them. We need to move on. And we need to sort of encourage them to move on, and we need to provide a platform for them to move on. Let's have a future where black parents don't have to tell their children that their prosperity and opportunity is solely dependent on them having to be twice as good as their white counterparts. Where young black people don't have to consider their race. Let's know the disadvantages because of their race. We're making plans and goals for the future. I think we need to start talking to our white peers, our friends, workmates and neighbours about how they can become allies or even better allies. It's important to understand that conversations about race and racism can make some people feel awkward and uncomfortable. But if there's a willingness to be educated and informed, it's worth accepting that there may be a few bumps in the road. Creating a respectful environment is the right approach to having a meaningful conversation about race and racism. Change doesn't come easily, and continuous active work must be done in order to make a positive impact. We can all try and make an impact at work or in our everyday encounters. Our self-organised group are currently developing a campaign to address the issue of structural racism in Wales, namely the collective failure of local authorities, health boards and police forces to appoint a black chief executive officer, or any significant numbers of black executive, non-executive officers or even senior managers. The campaign, we hope, will seek to achieve the following. We're looking to work with Cymru Wales labelling to influence Welsh Government at the highest level to address this inequality, and to lobby the Labour Party to seek to return a black member of Parliament from Wales in the next general election. We hope to continue to work and provide sponsorship support with Black History Month, Joyce the Red Card and Race Council Cymru. We will maintain our support of Black Lives Matter and other anti-racist movements so it remains a constant reminder of ongoing dialogue, awareness and change. We should find a way to lobby and challenge organisations to move towards a multicultural workforce and explain that an assortment of different experiences, opinions and diverse ideas can lead to innovation and better performance. Maybe we should set up a network of diversity and inclusion speakers to teach business leaders how to cultivate a welcoming environment for all races and cultures. I'd like to leave you now with two quotes from Angela Davis, an American political activist and academic, who said it best when she said, "In a racist society, it's not enough to be non-racist, we must be anti-racist." And she also said, "I am no longer accepting the things that I cannot change, I am changing the things I cannot accept." Unison, stronger together. Thank you.
Can I invite Yolanda Banovigas from North Wales, representing the Black History North Wales Committee, to speak? We have to hear from North Wales in the conference. We celebrate Dr. Marian Gwyn, who worked with Professor Charlotte Williams, to write the new report that we're expecting on inclusion of Black and diverse histories in the Welsh curriculum. So really great to have North Wales here. Over to you, Yolanda.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for attending. I know I'm not on the list, so I'm not going to take you any longer. I'm just going to would like to let you know that here in North Wales, and particularly here in Wrexham, where I live, racism also exists, even though we are less Black members, we are not less people. We are in disproportion compared to South Wales and perhaps the rest of the world, mainly because we don't have Black police officers, we don't have Black people working in the council, we don't have Black people working in the banks and so on. So we are not represented at all, but it doesn't mean that racism still doesn't exist. We might be less, but our voices are very strong, and we would like to everybody to listen to us, and whatever support you find for yourselves in South Wales, please always remember about us. We're just not as maybe well organized, because we are not that many people, but we are very much willing to work with everyone. Please don't look at us like competition. We're not here to compete. We are here to work with you. Please don't make us fight with each other for very little amounts of funding that you might have. Please distribute it evenly to everyone, all of our organizations, and everybody works toward the elimination of racism and all the problems that we are facing at the moment. I want to thank you, all the members of Black Lives Matter, for the wonderful work that you are doing. Even though there's a new bill that just passed yesterday, where we're losing our rights to protest. So be very careful. It's not what we were expecting at this time. We were expecting more support from all of you, but unfortunately our voices are being cut, and please help us for this not to happen with us. So I just want to thank you, everybody, for all of your hard work and for everything you do. You are all amazing. Thank you, Diolch, obrigada, Uzo, much love to you and everybody.
Diolch yn fawr, Yolanda, diolch yn fawr. Let me just make it clear that we invited all the regional equality leads across the whole of Wales, and anybody you haven't seen is because they chose not to appear, not because they weren't given a chance. I just want to put that word out there. Everybody was involved and invited from the Wales Race Forum to participate, and people who are here chose to be here. Thank you. So right away, we go to the fantastic Vice Chair of Race Council Cymru, Professor Emmanuel Ogbonna, who's one of the first professors appointed here in Wales, and who chairs the Welsh Government Socio-Economic committee subgroup that was going to look at the impact of COVID-19 on Black, Asian, and minority ethnic people. On the foundation of that report and the work done by East and a few other organizations like Show Racism, the Red Card, we all moved to begin to do this work at the request of the Deputy Minister and Chief Whip Jane Hart to produce the first anti-racism action plan, race equality action plan that Welsh Government has set out for the whole of Wales. So this is really powerful. He is the chair, well, co-chair with the permanent secretary, Shan Morgan, on the steering committee producing this work plan, and leads a strong collaboration of ethnic minority, Black, Asian, minority ethnic people, and civil servants as they do this work. Over to you, Professor Emmanuel Ogbonna from Cardiff University. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Uzo. And I think you've done half of the job for me. So I shall just say thank you very much. And thanks for having me. Okay. I want to talk about the work we are doing on the Race Equality Action Plan. But I realize I haven't got an awful lot of time to be able to talk about that work in detail. And even if I did, it would take a very long time, and as such, you wouldn't want to hear that. But I'm sure many of you would be able to read that plan when you do get it. What I want to say here is that although we tried to be as comprehensive as we could, but we were never going to cover every single detail. But the most important thing is that we have an action plan, and an action plan that is different. And we have the foundation to be able to do something great in the future. So let us engage with that process, and then let us be as supportive as we can be, make comments, feedback into the Welsh government, and then support the plan, because it would be a wonderful platform upon which greater things can be done. Why do I say that? Why do I think that this particular plan will be different from previous plans? And I want to spend my time this morning trying to convince you, actually this afternoon, it's already past 12, trying to convince you on that. The first reason that lead me to believe that the plan we have is going to be different is that we have, as you could see from the First Minister and the Deputy Minister and Chief Whip, we have political patronage. And that political patronage is something that has been lacking for this particular cause that we are all fighting. It's been lacking for many generations. We've had many politicians come and go, but nobody's ever really taken the type of time and effort and commitment that we've had from the First Minister and Deputy Minister. My second reason is the leadership of the group. This is the first time in the history of the Welsh government that such an important initiative has been led by the highest ranked civil servant in Dame Sian Morgan, with an external specialist, expert, academic, whatever you may want to call me, in the shape of myself. So we are both leading this group and bringing to it diverse leadership skills, and something that has been working very well. And as you can see from, or some of you may be aware, from what is happening in the Welsh government, there is a bit of a culture change going on in the Welsh government. One example of that is that Dame Sian Morgan has changed her objectives and putting as part of her objective, as part of her key performance indicator in the language of business, to lead an anti-racist Welsh government. And if you have the highest ranked civil servant in Wales claiming to lead or wanting to lead an anti-racist unit or group, then it's likely that that would be something that will cascade down the line. So we expect the Welsh government to lead in this direction. And once the Welsh government leads, I believe everybody else will follow. Of course, another reason is that we have distinguished people from all sectors, including, for example, people that are representatives of trade unions, people that represent local authorities, people that work with all sorts of diversity groups. But more importantly, we have the voices of the community, the multiple communities that make up what we know as Black, Asian, minority, ethnic groups. So we have all those people coming in and feeding into this plan. And more importantly, our focus on anti-racism. From the very first day I started this job, I said two things to the group and to the Deputy Minister in particular. Number one, this plan must be focused on anti-racism, not non-racism, not a little bit racism that we can accept, but anti-racism. And it's particularly pleasing to note that the Welsh government has bought into that ideology and have adopted that stance. And indeed, I ran a training program with the entire Welsh cabinet, including the First Minister and Deputy Minister, on Monday, and it lasted an hour and a half. which was very surprising to me that they were willing to spend that long discussing some of the intricacies that are associated with somebody taking the view of anti-racism. And the second thing that I insisted on was that we had to close what I call the implementation gap, which is the gap between the rhetoric and the reality, the practice. Because for many generations, we've had all sorts of plans, race equality plans of various nature, but they haven't been implemented. We have legislation that says we should not discriminate against people on grounds of their race or ethnicity, but it hasn't been implemented. Nobody's done anything on that. And we insisted that we must have at the center of the Race Equality Action Plan a governance strategy that will drive through implementation. That is what we are working on now. So I believe this is a very different plan. But just to round up, because I know I haven't got long, I don't think we can take all this for granted. We have political patronage now. The issue is politically central today, but in a few months' time, hopefully the pandemic is over, and then we'll begin to think about how we build back, as it referred to. When we begin to think about how we build back, it means that resources will be limited, and limited resources nearly always means that Black minority ethnic groups would suffer more disproportionately. So that means that is something that might come in the future. How do we prevent that from coming? We prevent that by being as politically active as we can be. We have to all make sure that we are registered to vote and that we use our votes. We use our votes. If we feel that somebody is more likely to help us to achieve our objective, then we must make sure that those people are returned to power. Because if they are not in power, they are not going to be able to help us. So we cannot take it for granted that these things will happen. You only have to go down the M4 to see what is happening out there. They don't believe that there is any link between people's race, in other words, discrimination, and the outcomes from COVID-19. They believe it's something to do with class. They believe it's something to do with geographical region. We know that not to be the case, but we are probably the only government that has really taken that belief, not just as something that may or may not be, something that they've accepted that is, and are trying to do something about. So we have to do all we can to make sure that we continue in that direction. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much. Erudite Professor Emmanuel Ogbonna. Wow, that is a sucker punch. Absolutely spot on. If you haven't registered to vote, it might be too late. Go and check if you can still register. Please take it seriously. We need to continue to hold our senior Welsh government officials to account on this and many other things. Right now, to close the conference, thank you to every single partner who held hands together in unity to combat and tackle racism. Thank you to Catherine White from the United Nations. Thank you to her aunties, Valretta, Barbara, and Sister Hadassah. Thank you to all who have supported. The last and final words must be given to Judge Ray Singh, who is the chair of Race Council Cymru, but also who chaired the First Minister's COVID-19 Black, Asian and Minority Advisory Committee, and who saw the writing on the wall when we began to see the images on our screens on the TV. And the board collectively wrote to the First Minister saying, there's a problem, we want to help. Let me just say, Professor Ogbonna, Judge Singh, East, Wales TUC, every single group that have worked on that Race Equality Action Plan, nobody has been paid for that work. They have given their time free of charge. I think it's so important. Dr. Marian Gwynn, all of them who've served in any form or other have worked without pay. That is so important to mark. Let me name the partners who put this conference together. We don't want any names rising. We want a collective group of organizations to be recognized. All the local authorities that have signed the Zero Racism, including Tovine, all the regional cohesion officers, the National Museum of Wales, Unison Cymru, Wales TUC, the Welsh Government, BAWZO, Black Lives Matter Wales, Black History Wales Cymru, Disability Wales, Diverse Cymru, East Wales, Horn Development Association, Kiran Cymru, Nwami, Race Alliance Wales, Race Equality First, Stand Up to Racism, Stonewall Cymru, WEN Wales, Women Equality Network Wales, Show Racism the Red Card, and Race Council Cymru. If I have missed you out, please forgive, but that is the list of everybody who made today happen. A big thank you to you all. Over to you, Judge Singh, to take us home and out. And thank you to Taiwo from Vivid Block for running the Zoom. Thank you.
Thank you, Uzo. Prananda, Assalamu alaikum, Namaste, Salom, Bula. I'm sorry that some of you had been cut short in addressing. Uzo has gone through the list. I'm not going to go through. I remove one page of my address now because she's covered those. But we apologize for cutting you short. Hopefully next year we'll have longer period so that you can make your contribution in full. What we are taking away from today's message is not only from the First Minister and the Deputy Minister, but from us all and from the organizations, public and private sectors, that zero tolerance racism. Tolerance to racism in Wales is zero. We take away the message from Savannah. The workforce must look inside and ask themselves, why is it, ask honest questions, why is it that we don't have true representation of the community we represent? The political leaders, the judiciary, the prison service, education sector, they must ask those honest questions and take the message from Queen Nish, which is so impressive. Become an ambassador here in Wales to make sure that the zero tolerance to racism. For many decades, in our fight against racism, we have had the response, I'm not a racist. True, yet they did nothing to stop it. To have the First Minister and Deputy Minister adopt, along with us here today, and endorse, together with various public and private bodies, anti-racist Wales, zero racism Wales, it now shifts the burden on you to make sure that racism is not tolerated, on us all. So let's work forward. I'm not a racist is not enough. What am I doing to stop racism? Racism is wrong. Racism is divisive. Racism is, and its impact on individuals, human beings, it hurts. Let's eliminate that. So, Diokumar, thank you all for your contribution, and let's work together. Race Council Cymru is here to embrace you all, to work and move forward together. Diokumar, dhanyavad.